Buenas tardes a todos, muchas gracias por estar aquí. Pues ya son 5:05, así que empecemos. Primero que nada, les quiero presentar a nuestro ponente del día de hoy. Su nombre es Steve Hall. Él es actualmente chairman del Comité Ejecutivo de Capitalismo Consciente. Ha estado en la parte internacional, en el Consejo Internacional por 6 años. Por los últimos 12 años, ha estado poniendo capitalismo consciente en práctica como fundador y CEO para crecer a su negocio que es de automotriz. Y al día de hoy ya tiene un valor por encima de los $1,000 millones y fue posible, gracias a esto, venderlo a una empresa del Fortune 300 en 2017. Y ahora como miembro del consejo, como consultor y como mentor de CEOs y de líderes empresariales que buscan incorporar capitalismo consciente en sus negocios como parte de su modelo de negocio. El señor Hall está expandiendo el conocimiento, este movimiento y el impacto que tiene capitalismo consciente en organizaciones como YPO, como el Instituto de Empresas Americanas y otras redes de negocios a lo largo de Estados Unidos, como CEO de su fundación privada Make It Better y por su organización que se llama Generosity Ventures. Entonces, hoy tenemos a Steve Hall aquí para que nos platique acerca de los negocios, de cómo incorporar capitalismo consciente a ventas, a estrategias de negocio, pero sobre todo lo que espera de nosotros Steve Hall es que hagamos muchas preguntas. Eh, Hoy la verdad es que queremos más una conversación que otra cosa. Entonces, tengan listas sus preguntas. Si no se sienten confiados de escribirlas en inglés o de decirlas en inglés, nos las pueden poner en el chat en español y nosotros lo leemos en inglés. Así que, por favor, todas las preguntas que quieran hacer, si son en español, pónganmelas en el chat y yo las leo en inglés. Si van a ser en inglés, levanten la mano y les damos la palabra, ¿ok? So now I'm gonna shift to English. Now that I've introduced Mr. Steve Hall, please, Steve, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. And first, thank you for allowing me the freedom to speak with you in English, because if I attempted this in Spanish, I don't think any of you would take away one single thing. I have an 11-year-old son who's fluent in Spanish, and anytime he doesn't want me to know what he's saying, he'll turn immediately to Spanish. So thank you for allowing me to do this. And also, first, just thank you for the privilege just to be able to talk to such amazing leaders. When Raj Sisodia first asked me to have a conversation, I was excited because I always love the opportunity to be in conversations with real leaders who aren't just here to learn, they're actually serious about applying conscious capitalism in their organizations. And I do want to, just begin by recognizing how difficult this journey is. I think, for the most part, I describe conscious capitalism as something that's probably pretty easy to get your head around and to understand, but extremely difficult to actually put into practice in your organization. At least that was my experience. Fortunately, I had some incredible leaders and coaches and mentors that were able to stay with me for several years through the journey. I think the thing for me that made conscious capitalism require so much courage to implement is that, unlike a lot of the things that I was taught in business school of how to run a business, there wasn't a lot of hard metrics to measure the impact of how conscious capitalism was performing in our business early on. It's not intuitive, and it really takes a lot of courage to put these principles and tenets into practice for several years without really knowing that, is it working? Is it having an impact? Because they do take several years to show up. And I hope I can share some of that with you and potentially give you some confidence that you could be on the right path if you're willing to stick with this long term. My hope also is that this can be more of a conversation than a presentation. You know, my intention. I would rather share with you my intention for today. My intention is to have a conversation where I begin by sharing with you my journey in conscious capitalism, and I am here not to prescribe any things that any of you should do. Each of you have your own goals, your own businesses, your own industry, your own priority that I have very little knowledge about. So I am going to resist as best I can any temptation, as excited as I am about conscious capitalism, to try to prescribe anything that any of you should do. What my hope is that I share with you an experience that is similar to what you may be facing, and be able to give you a point of perspective on how you might consider approaching that. And if that resonates with you, lean into it, but it may not. It just may have worked for me and my industry and in the time that I was running the business. And so I'm very appreciative of that. And my last intention is to really share with you how we were able to build a culture of care and a development system of people that ended up really turning into a sustainable, durable differentiator in the automotive business, which is a very highly competitive, undifferentiated commodity business. To give you a little bit of ideas of the U.S. Auto industry, there's about 60,000 licensed, what they call independent dealers. These are dealers who do not sell the new cars. They only sell used cars. And of those 60,000, probably 10,000 of them go out of business every single year. So if you look back over the 15 years since we launched, actually it's been 20 years since we launched the business in 2004, there's probably been over 100,000 independent used car dealerships in the United States. And only about 5 or 6 of those have ever reached $1 billion in revenue and done it profitably. We were able to do that. We were one of those folks. And I will share with you why I believe that conscious capitalism played a significant role. And I would also share with you that I don't think I could have built the company to this size without following the principles of conscious capitalism. I had no outside investors. I self-funded the business all the way to the time I sold it. And I sold it to a Fortune 300 company that was in the new car space, and stayed on with them a few years to integrate the culture. So what I really want to tell you a little bit, I'll give you kind of how we were able to go from 0 to $1 billion, and then talk to you about how we use conscious capitalism to drive that. So just give you some feedback on my journey. It really started at 17 years old when I got a job at a car dealership to have money for college and just to pay the college expenses. And through that, I sold cars over the summer. And then through college, I was going to auto auctions and buying cars for the dealership back home that I worked for. And when I graduated college, I said, look, I know how to buy cars and I know how to sell cars. I think I've got this car game figured out at the young age of 22 years old. So why do I need to go work for anybody? I'm just going to open my own business. And that turned out to be one of the best lessons that I learned, because I went in there, launched the business, and within 2.5 years, I had to close the doors. And I was missing one thing. I was missing the understanding of cash flow. And I basically had sold so many cars that all of my cash was tied up in inventory and receivables. And it put me out of business. Even though I was making lots of profit, I didn't understand why I could sell so many cars and not have any cash. And so at that time, I said, look, I think there's more for me to learn. And I went in and got to work for some amazing organizations in the Washington, D.C. area, some big dealer groups that invested in me and taught me a lot of lessons. I had the privilege of working in some great cultures, and I had the privilege of working in some very toxic cultures. And I say it's a privilege to work in a toxic culture because it helped me understand. And it's a question that I even asked today is even though I'm not operating, I'm investing more today. But even during the operation, I always would ask myself, what's the business I don't want to be in? Because it's easy to find the business you want to be in. But I was able to, through working in some tough cultures, I was able to find that the parts of the business where I just did not want to have anything to do with. And that really narrowed the focus of where I wanted to concentrate the talents and gifts and energy and resources that I had. And so I relaunched the business again. About 10 years later, after I closed the first business. And I really understood the appreciation, not just of culture, but also the importance of turning inventory. And the US industry, the average used car dealer was turning their inventory about 5 to 6 times a year. We were turning our inventory 15 to 18 times a year. So we were turning it significantly faster, 3 to 4 times our competition. And when you have a high ticket item that has mass depreciation, you can create some tremendous pricing power. And that's exactly what we did. Because these cars were depreciating 15, 20, 25% a year, and the average purchase price was $35,000, we were able to save a ton of money in depreciation. And so what that did, if we were able to turn that depreciation into our advantage, we were able to eventually get to a price point where our retail price of the car was less than our competition's cost in the vehicle. Now, let me say that again. Our retail price, the price we offered our cars to the consumer, was lower than our direct competitors' cost they had in the car. And they could not figure out how we were able to sell cars at such a low price and turn it into profit. And that's where conscious capitalism unlocked it for me. And a lot of what I'm going to share with you today, it's a lot easier for me to look back and connect these dots. I'm not sure I certainly didn't connect them looking forward while I was running the business. Like I said, I had just great coaches and great mentors and fellow travelers in the conscious capital community that were sticking with me and just really encouraging me to stay in the game and keep applying the principles. But looking back, I now can see how these dots connected to our ability to turn inventory faster than our competition. And I contribute conscious capitalism for giving us the pricing advantage. And when we could sell our cars below our competitors' cost, all we had to do was just keep that flywheel moving and turning and turning. And that was the unlocking move that allowed us to really reach $1 billion in sales. I tell the story of how the first probably 7, 8 years of the business, I was managing it the way I was taught in business school, very short term, focused on metrics that drive sales, revenue, profits, cash flow. And the business really got stuck between it would fluctuate between the 50 to the $80 million level a year in revenue. And it was really based on what the market was doing. If the market was doing good, we could get up to about 75, 80 million. If the the auto market wasn't doing well and lenders were tightening the credit in the US, we would fall back to the $50 million level. And we were totally reliant. That's how we thought the business just operated. You just had to survive the bad times, and so you could be around for the good times and make your money in the good times and pull back in the bad times. And that's literally how I thought the business was done, until I went to the CEO Summit of Conscious Capitalism and I met some leaders that were looking at their businesses much different than the way I looked at my business. These people weren't looking at their business in monthly sales and profits or quarterly revenue targets or even annual profit and EBITDA and revenue. They were looking at their business in multiple decades. And what I learned is they're making entirely different decisions about their business than I'm making about my business when they have a long-term horizon. And what would my business look like if I started to lift up my head and I started to take a long-term view? I would probably make different hiring decisions. I would make different onboarding decisions. I would make different development systems. And so I said, look, if I can just hang around these leaders a little bit more, I think I've got a lot to learn. And I think they could help me figure out some of the frustrations that were holding me back. And a lot of it was my own leadership style. And so one of the first things I did is I enrolled in a leadership academy who's led by a board member in Conscious Capitalism, Rand Stagen of the Stagen Academy. And that really helped me identify the leadership gaps that I was having. And I remember early on, it was Rand told me, he said, leaders get the organizations they deserve. So if you don't like your 80 million, look, there's no one else to look to besides yourself. And if you want to grow the business, you're the constraint to the business. So you have to grow first. And so I had to do the work. And I started investing in my own leadership with the coach, and they started pointing out some things that they were blind spots to me. And there were things like, you're overwhelming your people. You're placing way too many priorities at one time on them. And what you call laziness or what you call resistance is actually confusion and exhaustion. And until you're able to really get clear on what is the priority, not what are the priorities, that was really helpful. Small stuff, the body language, the tone that I spoke in really sent ripple effects. I call it, my whispers came across as shouts. And I didn't realize that. And so the awareness of my leadership style, how I was communicating, how I was framing things, I tended to lead more with an agenda instead of intentions. And when my coach was able to say, what do you really want for your people? And in one of the first exercises we did was we got real clarity on the role that each stakeholder could add to the business. And we looked at it and says, what would the business look like if our employees were fully engaged, if they knew exactly how to identify their talents and gifts and apply them into the organization to do the best work of their lives? What if they looked at this organization as, this is the place I want to do the best work of my life? What would the organization look like? How much value would that add? And he started thinking about that. I was like, wow, that can add a lot of value to us. Then I looked at our customers. What value do our customers have to play in this? And what value can they add to us if we made it really easy, transparent, and affordable to purchase a used vehicle? How much more would they add? They would add tons of revenue to us. What about our suppliers? If we looked at our lenders who were financing the cars because they were the ones that really inspired people to buy more cars. If they had affordable financing programs, people would buy more cars. If our lenders weren't profitable, they had to tighten their credit criteria And when they tighten their credit card criteria, our ability to sell cars really declined. But if we could find ways to help make our lenders more profitable, they would take that profit, reinvest it in programs to drive more affordable programs, and it's a win-win-win. Our truck drivers who were transporting our cars, we were buying cars all over the country. How do we get them to our lots on time so we could turn that inventory faster? We looked at our local communities and said, do our local communities want us here? Do they want to do business with them? And we said, wow, what would this business look like if our employees were more engaged, our customers were more loyal, our suppliers were more innovative and creative, our communities were more supportive and wanted us there? And we started saying, okay, we know that those things can make a difference. How do we build? And that's where the culture of care came from, which was caring acts randomly expressed. And we drove that culture throughout every department in our company to say, look, we are always going to lead with care. Because if we can get every one of these stakeholders on board and supporting us, and we support them, if they know that we care, we're going to have a different relationship and than our competitors. And remember, there's 60,000 auto dealers all competing for your business. And so when you're in a highly competitive, undifferentiated business, the only way to survive is you got to create a sustainable differentiator. And what our differentiator was, we believed, was we will have a stronger, healthier relationship with our stakeholder community. And we're going to use care to build that healthy relationship. And if that relationship is healthy, guess what? Inventory is going to turn a lot faster. And when inventory turns a lot faster, we can lower price. So we showed more and more care toward each of those stakeholders as we showed and demonstrated more care for their well-being and understood what their needs are and started delivering what they were looking for. They started leaning in and supporting us, and they were doing things for us that they weren't doing for most of our competitors. And that allowed us to lower price. And as we lowered price, we sold more cars. And then we started taking those profits and reinvesting it back into our stakeholders. And guess what? They engaged even at a deeper level, which allowed us to lower price again. And then as we lowered price again, we would invest it back into our stakeholders. And that was the key. And that's how conscious capitalism worked. It's not equal. We didn't say every stakeholder gets equal attention and equal resources, but it's got to be fair, and it's got to be based on how much that each stakeholder was contributing. That was our belief. And so that's what really changed the game for us. I'll give you one example of this culture of care. When we were getting acquired by the parent company, so as mentioned, we were about $1 billion in revenue, and they were about a $10 billion company. And they were doing their final at closing, they were coming through and they're like, look, we've got a question for you. We're really excited about this business. How in the world are you able to get your cars from California to Texas at 25% cheaper than what we can? We're 10 times as big as you are. We buy 10 times as many cars, and yet you're getting 25% less. And we had no idea. We had no idea that we were that much less than our competition. What we did know is the price we were paying worked for us, and it worked for our trucker. So I told the CFO, I said, look, I don't know. I said, but who does know is the truck driver that's right outside our store. Why don't you go ask him? And he's like, really? I was like, yeah. And so he walks out, and the truck driver's unloading the cars, and he says, he was telling me, he says, look, how do you deliver these cars for $400 when we've got a Honda store a mile and a half up the road, and you're charging us $550 a car? And he said, well, I'll tell you why. He said, let me tell you what it's like to deliver a car for you. He said, the auctions in California are on Friday. We get the call on Thursday that we're going to have to pick up on Friday. I load up on Friday. I drive all the way from California to Texas. And by the way, I coach my daughter's softball game, and I have to miss that. And I understand that that's just, I have to put money on the table, and I'm okay with that. But when I have to drive all the way across country and miss her game, and I show up at your dealership and no one's there to greet me, no one's there to help me tell me where to put the cars, I then have to walk into the showroom. I get yelled at for being in the showroom because I'm wearing a tank top and I'm greasy, and they tell me to get out and they'll be with me. And then I wait for another hour. I have to pull them around to the back of the lot. I unload them. I don't know who to give the keys to. And then I leave, and I have to chase my check. 2 weeks later, I'm calling for my money, and you're saying, yeah, we'll get it to you. We'll get it to you, because that's how they want to make money, is on the float. And he says, that's just tough. He said, when we go to Driver Select, we get a call from a guy named Steve Sullins. He tells us where to park. He meets us when we show up at the store. He welcomes us. He then walks me into their cafeteria, and he says things like, hey, it's Taco Tuesday. Come on in and have some. Make sure you try the chicken tacos, and packs them up for the road. And here's some snacks as well. Oh, and by the way, here's your check. It's cut. It's on the spot. And he says, it's just much easier. And he says, I get my money on time, but more importantly, I'm treated like a human being. That's why I deliver the car for $400. And if I have to put up with the treatment that your other store is treating me, he goes, I have to do it because I have to pay bills, but I'm going to charge extra for that. That's the culture of care that we had. That's one of the ways that we lowered price. Another way that we did it was with our banks. So we had banks like Capital One, Ally, Wells Fargo, and others. And we would actually show them data, our own personal data. What most of the industry, and when I got into the industry, this is how the industry looked at it. They believed that everything was a zero-sum game. If I gave up something, then I had to get something back in return. Otherwise, the pie is only so big. So if I give up a little piece of my slice, I better get a slice of yours, or else I'm going to be out. We didn't look at it. We said, look, these are great lenders, great partners for us. And we don't have to split the pie. We can work together and get creative and collaborate and use our critical thinking, and we can find ways to bake more pies. And that's what we're going to do. We're not going to split it. We're going to bake more pies. And here's how we're going to bake more pies. We showed our lenders that, for instance, I remember meeting with them. We said, look, in the prime credit scores, the people with the best credit, you are winning that business by a point to point and a half. You don't need to get that aggressive. You can raise your rates with us. You can charge us more and still get the business. And that's going to make you more profitable. Now, that's money out of our pocket that we're giving up. But what we're saying is, we trust you that you will be good stewards of that additional profit, because here it is, charge us more money for these sector of customers. And here, by the way, here are some people in the subprime space that you're not winning that business because the rates are too high. They can't afford the car they want. If you could lower those rates a little bit, then we could sell more cars to these customers, and you can also have the money on the prime customers and raise the rates. Net, you should make more money. You figure out how to split it and divide it. And we showed them how to make more money. The last example I'll give you is, we had in one of our markets, we had a small family business, the Hernandez family. And the Hernandez family was doing all of our detail. And in most of the markets we use mom and pop family owned businesses to do the detail. And these this family probably did some of the best work of any of the markets we were in. And they couldn't afford to pay their people. And we're like, wait a second, we don't understand. We're giving you more money, but you're not able to pay all your people. And so we actually sat down with them and said, we're going to help you find more ways to make money. All you're doing is cleaning the cars and vacuuming them out. Why don't we teach your people how to pull dents on the car? Why don't we teach your people how to do touch up on the scratches of it? Why don't we teach your people how to do leather repair? And all of a sudden, instead of getting $200 $250 a car, they were able to get $350, $400 a car. And now guess what? They were making more money. We were getting the cars faster because one company was doing more of it and they were able to pay their people more money. So those are just examples of just caring for the stakeholders, making sure that, these are people that their fingerprints have an impact on our business. And we've got to figure out how to make sure that we get them excited to do business with us and that they are doing some of the best, they feel they're doing some of the best work of their lives for us. And if we can do that, and that's how we knew could drive prices down. So I'll pause there. Happy to share some other things, but let me pause there just to see if anybody has. I'd love some questions or even just comments from the group. So I'll open it up for a little bit.
Yes, we have one question or one comment
Just
in the.
one. Oh my goodness. All
I
right.
know.
All
So
right.
it says, hello, Steve. Can you do a zoom in of your personal process when you realized your company needed to do things differently, stakeholders? Maybe something about finding your personal process or something? Purpose, I'm sorry, personal purpose.
Yeah. So my personal purpose is to be a reflection of God's love, grace, and generosity in the world. And that was probably about a 2-year journey. As I mentioned, the Stagen Academy. I did a 1-year course with them called the ILP, the Integral Learning Program, Integral Leadership Program. And through that work, we had to journal a lot about what purpose is. And they gave us some frameworks, and I played around with it and wrote my purpose down. And I just lived with it, saying, I'm going to write I don't even remember what my original purpose was, but I wrote it down. And it wasn't one of those things, yep, nailed it, put it away, and got it. It was actually, okay, I'm going to write it down. Then how do I express this in my work? And I started looking at more of like, gosh, nope, that doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right. And I had to, and this was difficult for me, as I was always taught that, especially in my school, is you got to have the answer. You got to have the answer, and you get rewarded and you get recognized. And when I got into the workplace, I was recognized and rewarded when I had the answers, and I was penalized and criticized when I didn't have the answer. And so I'd always focus on the answer. What I've learned since then is you're better off having a good question than a great answer. And a good question means, what is that question you can hold on to and keep asking over and over and over without worrying about what the answer is, because the first answer isn't the best answer, and keep asking. So I held on to that purpose over and over and over. What is my purpose? What is my purpose? And I would reflect on that. I would journal about that. I would meditate a little bit on that. And over about a 2-year period of time, it just started like, gosh, there's something about, I would always pray and ask for help and guidance. And I'm like, wow, well, there's something with God in there. And then, I grew up with a mom who was a nurse, and she had a big impact on me. And there was this love and care and generosity. And so I started to those words just started to resonate for me over and over and over. And then I went into the workplace and say, how can I be a reflection of God's love, grace, and generosity today? And I would journal, where did I show up in alignment with that? And then when I would get frustrated or I would experience some pain in the business, I would reflect back as, am I leaning into this pain, this frustration, this disappointment, this discomfort with love, grace, and generosity? Or am I leaning in with it with arrogance and prejudice and cynicism and criticism and envy and jealousy and all the destructive things? And so that was the process. It was working with a coach over a few years, putting it to practice, coming back to the coach, making adjustments, coming back to the coach, making adjustments, and it just builds. What else? We got to have one more.
Yeah, we have one more.
One more. All right. That's good.
How do you see the future of conscious capitalism in an increasingly digital and globalized world?
Okay. What I've learned is the best way to be proven wrong is to make a prediction. And so I struggle just like anybody, worried about like what's the future look like. And so what I try to do is a couple things. Is the best thing I've found is, instead of trying to predict it, how do I prepare for it? So no matter what happens, I can adjust. And I start with this question. Instead of what does the future look like? What's going to be different? I start with the question is, what's still going to matter in the future, no matter what? And I'm a big believer that the things that we put into practice are still going to matter. I don't see a world, no matter which direction it goes in, where things like valuing your suppliers, making sure your suppliers are profitable, is going to go away. In fact, I always believe I looked at like, what are the absolute most critical relationships? There's probably one or two relationships I imagine in your business that if we lost this relationship, it would sting and it could really hurt. And so for us, it was two of our big lenders that were providing retail auto financing programs for our customers. And one was doing the floor plan for our inventory. And we said, look, we want to make sure with those lenders, we are one of their most profitable customers. Now, the rest of the industry was trying to figure out how to squeeze them because they thought they could, if we pay less, then we can make more money. That's not always the case, because when you are the least profitable customer, you're going to be the one that they give the least amount of service to, most likely. When times get tough, your business is going to be the one on the chopping block. But if you're the most profitable customer that they have, and you're bringing them ideas of ways they can improve their business, and you're teaching them about your industry and ways and sharing with them things that they may not see, you're going to have a different relationship. You may be paying a little bit more for their services, but you're going to have more flexibility, is at least what we found. And they were able to give us flexibility that they would not extend to our other competitors. And that really helped us, again, lower price. So I would say that in a digital world, I still think these principles matter. You've got to get clarity on the role and the value that your stakeholders have, and make sure you're investing in them. That's one thing that I see. I think still, I love the digital world, but again, for the people that I want to make sure are staying engaged with our business, I am getting face to face with them. Just little things, even if you can't get face to face. One of the best things I was taught, is so easy to do, is just a handwritten note and mail it to someone. I'd have lunch with with someone, and I would just write them a handwritten note, and they would call and go, "Oh my gosh, thank you for that." I'm like, "For a handwritten note?" But then I realized it's like they're so used to getting texts or emails that a handwritten note, just taking the time that, yes, I cared enough. You made such a meaningful impact to me that I took time to write you a letter and stick it in the mail. Those are the things I think that's going to matter. I do worry in the short term. Um, Talk about some of the policies, especially, I'm obviously more focused on the U.S. I don't like the idea of tariffs. I think that they create all kinds of complexity for us. So I do worry. I wish our politicians would come to our CEO summit and learn how to be conscious leaders. So I do worry that that's going to drive up further inflation, and I hope that our other leaders will recognize that. But overall, I think that if we all look back over just about any decade, we're all saying the world's going to hell, and somehow we just manage through it, and it's just some of it is just we've got to just position ourselves, make sure that we're building agile cultures where no matter what our industry or what our country or what our world throws at us, that we are agile enough to react, and that we built a culture where people are okay with things changing at a rapid pace. And that starts again at the top with us as the leaders. And if we react emotionally to change, then that's going to send a ripple effect through our organizations. And so I don't know where the world's going. My guess is it's going to continue to evolve at a very rapidly pace, and we just got to be prepared for that. And the best way to prepare is still get clarity and care about your stakeholders and build that agile culture so you can react quickly.
We have three more questions, and then Patty raised her hand to do another question.
All
So
right.
first is Gabriel. He says, "Hello, Steve. Do you have a perspective on which stakeholder group could be more important to focus on at the beginning? Sometimes thinking about all your stakeholder groups complicates things. If you were to select one or two to begin working on, which would it be and why?"
Yeah. So I will tell you, this is not what I'm, again, recommending. This is only for our industry. And again, you are in a different business, different industry, in a different time, and a different country. So, but I'll tell you where I did and why. If I was starting out, it would start with the stakeholder of the employee, because that sets the culture of the business. And by culture, what I'm really talking about here is behaviors that drive how decisions are made. And I would get very, very clear on working with our employees to make sure that they understand why we are doing things the way we do it. We can teach them how to do the job, what job to do, but if they don't understand why, I found it very, very difficult for them to do the best work of their lives. But once I was able to explain why we do something, I saw the engagement and increase. So I would start with the employees, and the best thing that I ever found I did for our employees was I I understood this. It took me many, many years before I did it, but if I'm going to change the performance of our company, I've got to change the culture of our company. And if I'm going to change the culture of our company, I've got to change human behavior, which is very hard to do. It's much easier to unpack a P&L or a balance sheet or a product or a service, but trying to unpack human beings and how they behave is extremely difficult. And so what I really believed is the best way we could serve our employees and be able to help them meet the performance levels that we were asking them to do is make sure that I was investing in their personal development, not training, but their actual development. And what I mean by that is, am I creating the conditions for these people to be healthy physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually? So for instance, physically, am I able to give them good working conditions so I'm not burning them out? Are they getting sleep? Are they overstressed? We serve food. We serve breakfast and lunch every day and at our stores. And I was very conscious of the type of foods that we were putting into them. And so if we're offering them, and it looked, healthy food is expensive to serve, but you can find ways to get the cost affordable and still make it healthy. And when we did that, mentally, were we investing in their mental health? Were we creating environments where they could actually focus and they weren't distracted? Did we give them breaks in between so they could re-energize? Emotion. We really worked on their development and helped them. How do you manage drama in the workplace and at home? How do you frame things? How do you focus on your intentions versus an agenda? And we were giving them tools that really helped them process some of, because this, when business is growing and it's fast, it can be very stressful and emotional. And then spiritual. How do you find that work that is boring to everybody else but you? How do you find that work that you absolutely could do all day and never get tired of it? And what's that work that if you did for 30 minutes, you're exhausted? How do we shift that away from you? And how do we help you find the work that really invigorates you? And so that's where I would start, is with the employees from a culture perspective and the development system. And if we have more time, I'll share with you kind of our development system. But you mentioned you had two other questions.
Yes. Mariana says, thanks, Steve. Are there any common misconceptions about conscious capitalism that you'd like to address?
Yeah. I think the biggest one is there's this utopian perception of conscious capitalism that if you just do conscious capitalism, it's perfect. And that's why capitalism, at least in the US, is under attack, because people are saying, well, what about all this corporate greed? What about all this manipulation? What about these social media companies? What about the opioids that are being, these products and services that are ruining people's lives? That's capitalism, right? And those are bad practitioners of capitalism. What I can tell you is this about conscious capitalism. This is my personal belief, not the belief of the organization. My personal belief is that I think it's extremely difficult to build a business without doing some harm. But a conscious capitalist is a leader who recognizes that as I'm growing the business, there is harm that I am doing, and it's my responsibility to bring awareness to that harm and be able to dedicate the resources and energy to start addressing that and minimize that. And the impact that I'm making should be far greater. But there is no perfect form. And here's why I believe that. Whether it's communism, socialism, capitalism, it's all dependent on human beings. And human beings are flawed. We're all flawed. So if we're all flawed, how are we ever going to create a perfect system? And I think that's the misconception of, well, conscious capitalism, this is wrong with it, or this is wrong with it. Yes, it's not perfect, and it'll never be perfect. But I still believe it's the best system to elevate humanity that we have available that's known to us today. There may be a better system on the horizon. I haven't seen it. That's the misconception that I have.
We have another one from Patricio. Hi, Steve. Within companies, how can we integrate people who are not in tune with the implementation philosophy of conscious capitalism?
Good question. Here's what I've learned is this is something that's very difficult to prescribe to someone. The best way that I have been able to attract more interest in conscious capitalism is just getting out there and sharing how much I love the business that I'm in and why I enjoy it, the results I'm having it, and I will share with them that this is what conscious capitalism has done for my business, and it can do the same for yours. It may not, but I'm not. I don't think that there's going to be much success trying to convince people to do something they don't want to do or something they don't believe in. I think there's enough leaders out there who have who are open-minded enough and have the courage enough to put this into practice and at least give it a try. And the more that you can be in conversation with them, not one time, but multiple times along the way, there's just something about, for me, the best way that I have learned to grow and develop is peer-to-peer learning, practice-based, coach supported. So when I am gathering with fellow travelers and saying, I want to work on my higher purpose, or I want to work on building a better culture, or I want to work on my own personal leadership, or I want to work on my stakeholder orientation. Will you join me in this? And let's work on these things together as fellow CEOs or fellow leaders that are facing similar problems. And let's do that over the next year. And let's bounce those ideas around. And then maybe we hire a coach that can support us and hold us accountable for it. And we share it. And those are the best ways that I found to do it. But if you're not modeling it, I think it's tough.
Thank you. Patty, you had a question?
Yeah. Hello, Steve. Good afternoon. I guess you answer all my questions, but okay. Let's see if I have a little piece. What have you found effective for balancing compassion, love, and grace, like you said, and empathy with the realities of competitive business environment without being perceived as naive? Because I don't know, but sometimes it sounds too good to be true to be conscious, and it sounds to be good to row against the current on good, and the goodness of the world.
Yeah. Here's what I'll share with you is I tried not to let my morals be the ceiling of the morals in my industry. And what I mean by that is automotive is pretty cutthroat. There is a lot of pressure, manipulation, gimmicks, fraud. And if you start looking at that and saying, well, I'm not as bad as the other person, and you start justifying your own behavior just because someone else is doing it worse than you, I think you're in a vicious cycle. And I think you really have to be able to say, who is the person I want to be? How do I want to show up in the workplace? And that's why this stuff takes courage. It's a lot easier. It's why do you think most of our competition sets incentives in the short term? And they set them on things like sales, profits, because they're easy to measure. this conscious capitalism stuff it's very difficult to measure, and you have to have the courage to be able to stick it out for many years. Now, with that said, is this, if you think about your own life and like the people that you love the most and have the most respect for, my guess is some of those people, maybe not all of them, but some of those people were pretty tough on you at times. And here's the difference. When people know you care about them and you are interested in their growth and development, you can hold them a lot more accountable. But where people get mixed up is, oh, I don't want to be tough on them. Oh, I don't want to tell them bad news. You earn the right to be tough on them, but you can't come out of the gate and you can't treat every human being the exact same way, because people have different upbringings, they have different experiences, they have different priorities. You have no idea what else is going on in their lives at the time. But if you develop a healthy, strong relationship and you're the person that shows up where they go, I know Patty cares about me and that she has my best interest. And if she's giving me some tough news, I can take that. But if I don't trust you and I believe that you're just picking on me, then anything you say is going to be sensitive. So I think you lead with love and care to build the relationship, but that doesn't mean you can't be tough and you can't hold them accountable. Because actually, it's actually, when you think about it, it's actually pretty cruel. It's pretty inhumane not to hold them accountable. And that's the misconception, is we think, oh no, well, if I'm too tough on them and I don't, and I'm too easy, then they drift, they get away and they get away and they get away and they get away. And then their performance slips where you have to get. So I wouldn't be afraid to hold them accountable. It's just a matter of, do you have the healthy enough relationship to do that? That's the way I approach it. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we have 13 more minutes. Are there any other questions?
These are great questions, by the way. I hope we have more.
Come on, anyone?
Let me give you I'll talk about this for a few minutes and maybe some questions will pop up. I tell you how looking back, this is the best way I would describe my leadership when it was working well. So I'll give you this picture. One of the things I enjoyed when I came home is that I wanted to see a beautifully landscaped yard. I wanted green grass, I wanted flowers, I wanted tall trees, I wanted great mulch, and there was just something about, I think more so on the outside, where I could just go outside and walk around the yard, meant more to me than inside the house. And so I started thinking about, like, wow, I looked at my yard one day and I said, I have this zoysia, beautiful grass out front. And it started in a little area. There was this small little other type of grass called Bermuda grass. And it was a little patch. And I was like, it's not that big a deal. And so I ignored it. And what happens is Bermuda grass spreads much faster than zoysia. And eventually it starts eating and taking over the zoysia. And, you just get in there and you ignore it a little bit. It's not that big a deal. It's not that big a deal. It's not that big a deal. And all of a sudden you wake up and the Bermuda has taken over a good majority of the zoysia. And that's what cultures look like. There's all these little individuals in the company that's Bermuda grass, and it's behavior driven. And they're probably not aware of it. But to build a strong culture, you've got to protect the zoysia. And when you notice things early on, it goes back to Patty's point. It's like, you can't be just too soft and too love and care and not address. You have to be willing to kill the Bermuda, because if you don't, it can take over. And there's all these, and it's not necessarily individuals, it's behaviors. And good people can come from other organizations into your organization with the wrong behaviors that may have been allowed and permitted and even allowed them to rise to the top and be successful. So in automotive, things like heroism was really popular in automotive. And it was, look at all the things I could do. And in our business, it was, no, you have to be part of a system and a team. And we don't reward individual performance, we reward team performance. And if we had someone that was trying to push down the team and actually allow these people get ahead, my performance can go up. I can stand out and look better if I push other people down. And that is the Bermuda grass taking over the zoysia grass. And so that's a good example of that. The other example of culture that I'll give you is this. I remember when I first bought the home I'm in now, it had an irrigation system in most of the yard except one area. And so I was going around and watering the plants in the beginning. I was like, man, this is a lot of work. And then I got the quote for the irrigation system. I'm like, oh man, I don't know if I want to, but then again, I don't have time to keep more. I'm going to make the investment in the irrigation system. And I made the investment. Then what happened? The water bill went up. Oh, wow. The water bill. Okay. Well, I've got the irrigation system. I got the water bill. You know what? I need to cut back a little bit. What happens? And by the way, during this, when I got the irrigation system, the grass looked beautiful. The flowers were blooming. The trees were gorgeous. And I remember it was like the first 2 years, and we had some really hot summers, and we had a couple small freezes. And then springtime, they all came back. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. But then the water bill got high, and then I had to keep repairing the sprinkler system. I'm like, man, I'm putting all this money in. What happens if I just maybe don't maintain the sprinkler, to put all this preventative stuff in the sprinkler system, maybe cut back a little bit on that. Maybe I'll cut back a little bit on the water. Don't water so much. And I cut back maybe 10% on the water and a little bit on the maintenance. And guess what happened to the flowers and the grass and the trees? Nothing happened. They still look beautiful. I'm like, wow, this is great. I knew it. Let me dial it back a little bit more. And I dialed it back a little bit more. Guess what happened? Nothing. It still was great. I'm saving money. This is great. I'm cutting. But what I couldn't see was the roots. I couldn't see the quality of soil. I could only see above ground. So that winter, when we got that freeze, it just didn't wipe them down and they would grow back. It wiped them out. That next spring, I had to replace a large portion of it because I stopped investing. I was cutting, and I didn't see that the roots that made them strong and stable when the storms hit were too weak and they would be wiped out. And that's what happens in our business. And we don't know when, and we don't know what, but we know our industry, no matter what industry, is going to face some headwinds. And if our roots are strong, our culture is our roots are strong, our people will be able to survive those. But we got to keep investing in the people. Because if you do what I did with my yard and you start, well, business is tough. Let's cut back a little bit on the training. Let's cut back a little bit on the benefits. Let's cut back a little bit. And you got to still do these things. Look, I'm not saying you shouldn't make any cuts. I think you just got to really be careful not to cut, because when you cut, you will see some short-term improvements. And there's all kinds of excess and inefficiency in our business that we can cut out, and we need to be rigorous about that. But when it comes to your people's development, their learning and growth, I can tell you from my experience, dollar for dollar, there was not a better return on our dollar than putting it back into the development of our people. And when the storms hit and the economy pulls back and the lenders tighten up and the used car supply dries up, we took those hits just like the rest of our competition. We may not have fallen deeper, but we got hit. We did not escape those. But what happened when the market started to turn around because of the culture of care we built, we typically came back faster and jumped back out ahead because we had strong culture. In years early on, when we didn't have strong culture, when I was telling you I was stuck in kind of that $50 to $80 million pre-conscious capitalism, when we got hit, we were one of the last ones to come back because we weren't investing in our stakeholders. And so our roots were thin. And when those headwinds hit and those storms came across, they wiped us off, and we had to totally replant, rehire, retrain, re-onboard. And it took a while longer to come back. But for the organizations, when we started making and taking better care of our stakeholders, when those storms hit, it didn't. Our roots were able, we looked brown on the outside, but our roots were still healthy. So when the market came back, we came back quicker. So that's where I would really leave you with, is just the importance of investing in people's development and having a great development system.
We have two more questions.
All right, let's go.
Okay, so the first one. If you have people that it's very talented, even geniuses, but with a strong character and needs to be treated carefully, they're good people, but in occasions they're complicated. How do you make the fit with the rest of the employees that are not geniuses, but they're very good and working people?
Yeah, I'll tell you how I handle it. The mistake I made early on was I wanted to go in and try to fix the person. And I'm not good at fixing people. That's a tough business. What changed the game for me is when I went in and asked the one question, why? Why are you choosing to show up in this way? And let them explain why they are choosing to say the things they're saying or do the things they're doing. I notice you said this, or I notice you took this action. Help me understand why you decided that over everything else you could have done, and do it in a curious way. Yeah, because if it doesn't come across authentic and curious, then you're going to get into defense. But when I was curious enough to just say, look, I really want to understand this. And what I was able to see is like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. And what I really, in a lot of cases, they didn't understand the impact that their actions or behaviors or words were having. So I would ask them, I said, gosh, that I totally understand why you chose to say those things. Let me ask you this. Do you care about the relationships you have with these people? And they said, yeah, absolutely. I said, do you have idea of how those words may have impacted them? No. Would you be open to hearing how they may have impacted? And once people understand their impact, I find that you can, at least for me, is I would make quick judgments about people that probably had about at least an 80 to 90% chance of being inaccurate. That is high. And I would just jump to a conclusion really quickly because that reminded me of someone else's behavior in the past. Total different person with different motives in a different situation, but I would judge this person. So when I was able to hold back judgment and ask the question, why did you choose that? And be truly curious about it. And then ask if they would be interested in learning the wake that had on other people. And it was your intent to have this impact on this person, they'd say, absolutely not. Well, great. What other choices could you have made to accomplish the same thing? And just having that conversation with them. That's what I found worked really well. What didn't work is jumping to conclusions or trying to fix them. I had zero success with those.
Okay, so we are on time, but we have two more questions. So what do you want to do? Can you answer them, or do you need
Sure.
to?
I'm
Perfect.
happy to do it.
So the first one is any general advice for any industry to identify your sustainable differentiator?
Okay. No, I don't like giving advice on that. I will share with you how I found mine. How about that? What I basically did was this. I learned from a guy named Jim Senegal, who was the founder of Costco. And he was at a conscious capitalism CEO summit, and we were sitting on the couch. And I'm like, you built an amazing organization. How did you do it? He looked at me, he goes, deliberate loss of profits. I'm like, what? He goes, deliberate loss of profits. Let's explain that one. He said, I compete against organizations like Walmart and Target. They have 40,000 SKUs. I have 4,000. So they can beat me on price 9 out of 10 times. All I have to do is beat them 1 out of 10 times and I win. And how I did that was I have one giant size of peanut butter that's more than you can eat in a year. Walmart has 5 different sizes and 5 different brands. So they have 25 different sizes they've got to manage. And I can only have one. And by the way, mine goes from train to truck to warehouse. And you've got to go and pick it off the crates, and you've got to go bag it up yourself, and you've got to pay a membership fee. So what Jim basically did is he got really clear is what's the business I don't want to be in? I don't want to be in businesses where people are writing bad checks. I don't want to be in business that has a lot of theft in it. I don't want to be in businesses where people show up, crowd my parking lot, and come here just for a gallon of milk. I don't want to see them every day. I want to see them once a month. And they spend $600 instead of once a week spending $100. He was very clear on deliberate trade-offs. So what I believe in differentiation is what are all the trade-offs that you can make. And so except for this one thing that if you can deliver so much value in that one area, it'll create such incredible difference that people will choose you. In our business, there were 17 million new cars sold a year in the US and 40 million used cars sold. In between, there were 3 million shoppers that would either buy a new car or a used car. And it's all depending on if the new car, if the 1-year-old car had the same body style, the same technology, and under the factory warranty was 20% less, they would buy the 1-year-old car. If it was 30 to 35% less, they'd buy the 2-year-old car. And if it was 40% or more less, they'd buy the 3-year-old car. And so all we did, we took the Costco formula and said, we're only going to sell 1 to 3-year-old cars. So we're not going to sell new cars. We're not going to sell older cars. We're not going to service them because they're all under factory warranty. They can go to the new car dealers. And we started making and you have to do everything online. So you're not going to come to the store and shop. You have to go to the website. You have to order your car, put down your deposit, and then you can come in and test drive it. But you have to do all that. So we basically made all these trade-offs. So that's where I would create differentiation is understand all the different opportunities you have to win customers and what are all the trade-offs that you can make to be able to get down to what's that one thing you can deliver to that customer better than anybody else. And it could be price, It could be service. It could be innovation. That's the sustainable one. But it requires a lot of trade-offs. Where people try to do is, yes, I can do that and that and that and that and that. And they're trying to be, they offer so many products and services. We saw this with Steve Jobs when he took over Apple. When he took over Apple in the late 90s, he cut all those products back. Apple was almost out of business. And he came in and said, we are going to consolidate. And at the time, a few years later, Apple became the most valuable company in the world. And you could put all of their products at that time, mid 2000s, on one desk. And they just consolidated and did that. And that's where I would, that's what I would do again.
Okay, so last question. When a starting business is capital constrained, how would you recommend to balance these stakeholders' investments and keep growing profitably the company? When is the right time?
Yeah. So this is one of the things a lot of people, this is maybe back to your other question too about conscious capitalism. Conscious capitalism believes very heavily not only in generating extraordinary profits, but also profits for the shareholder. People think, oh, well, it's a stakeholder model. Yes, but if you think about the shareholder is the first person to put money into the company. They are taking the greatest risk. They're the last person to get it out. First money in, last money out, because the first person to get the money out is the customer. They get the product and service right away that day. Then the employee gets their check every week or 2 weeks or shortly after. The supplier will get paid eventually in a few weeks or a month. And so the investor is taking the biggest risk and the last to get out. So you have to make sure that you're building a model that can reward the shareholder. But you have to also, I think, manage those expectations. So if I'm starting out and I'm raising capital, I want to know, do my investors believe in my higher purpose for building? This is how we're going to build this business. For me, is if I was restarting that business, I would say, if you're the kind of investor that believes that if we invest in our other stakeholders and we take the profits we make and we reinvest them today in building healthier relationships with those, we will be able to have a relationship that will allow us to drive down prices so low that we will be able to generate extraordinary profits over the long term and return your money back to you at a much more profitable level long term. If you're the kind of investor that wants to put money in and get it back quickly, that's not our business model. But we believe managing expectations for your investors and shareholders is really, really important. They got to believe in you as the leader. They got to believe in your strategy, and they got to believe that they got to be aligned in the conscious capitalism philosophy that, yes, we are going to take profits and we're going to reinvest those profits in our employees and creating better conditions, better development, better benefits, better training, more time off. We're gonna actually help our help our suppliers be more profitable, help them find ways to drive up margin, and we'll pay more for those. We're going to help our customers. We're going to invest money in making our products more higher quality and actually more affordable. And then we do all those things well enough for a long period of time, you will get paid back a lot more money than if we generate the cash today and pay you back quickly. We will not have the profits to invest in those other stakeholders. And if one or more of those stakeholders is unhealthy for a long period of time, the business model is going to start to break down. So that's how I would manage investors early on.
Thank you. We have a last minute question. Can you answer it?
Yeah, sure. We've gone from one to many. I'm so happy.
I know.
I was worried when we were 35 minutes in, we had one question. I'm like, oh boy. All right, what do we got?
Okay, so how do we know if we are not correctly applying the philosophy of conscious capitalism?
Ask your stakeholders. They'll tell you. They will be curious. Go to your employees and have an honest conversation with them and say, here is my intentions. This is how I'm intending to show up, and this is the intended value I'm looking to create for you. Please be honest with me and let me know how I'm measuring up. For your suppliers, same question. Here is the value that I want to create for you. How am I showing up and delivering on that? And what else could I do to add value? Same thing with your customers and your community and your shareholders. Ask that question, how am I doing? Because you don't need to figure it out. They will tell you how you're doing.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Steve. This has been an amazing session. So I want to thank you. And gracias a todos por estar aquí. Nos pasamos del tiempo, perdimos algunos en el camino, pero la verdad es que creo que fue una gran sesión, así que muchísimas, muchísimas gracias por asistir el día de hoy. Thank you very much again, Steve. And
thank you. And thank you for the questions. And thank you for staying. It's great to see so many people still on, even though we're 10 minutes over. And thank you for the work you're doing in practicing conscious capitalism. I hope to see each of you at the CEO Summit soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.